So as I walk through what I'm going to call the 4 game changers that will help you achieve 6 times faster growth, I want you to think about how you could be more customer centric than you already are today so that you can create more customer value and achieve that long-term sustainable growth for your business. That's really my purpose for today's conversation. And I have found it really doesn't matter whether you're a small firm or a really large company. For these 4 game changers that I'm going to take you through, associated with customer centricity, they are going to make a difference in how you run your business. So I want to make sure I'm in the right place. Type in listen to this question. If you do not want to grow, type in, I do not want to grow. And I want to know if anybody typed that in, because I want to be talking to people who want to grow. Because here's what I know. I have never worked with a company, and my VisionEdge Marketing is 27 years old. And before that, I had a 20 plus corporate career. It's always been about customer acquisition and customer retention. And I have never met in any of the businesses we've served or any of the businesses I've been a part of, a CEO who didn't want to grow, no matter the market environment. Every company we've ever worked with, they tell us that growth is a priority, whether that's growing customers, growing revenue, growing value. And research by all the big guys, like KPMG, McKinsey, PwC, all their research says that the number 1 mandate for CEOs is growth. So let's have a conversation about how to do customer-centric growth. For those of you who do want to grow, you're going to need to be able to answer 2 critical questions, because these are your starting point. You have to know where you are today. Where's your revenue today? How many customers do you have? What your market share is? And to the earlier point, your competitive position. So if you don't know the answers to those, you go find those out. And the second question you have to be able to answer is, where do you want to go? How many more customers do you want to acquire? What other markets do you want to be in? How many of your customers do you want to retain and increase your share of wallet? What does business value mean for your organization? So those are things you need to know. You cannot go anywhere without knowing those things. Now, maybe you're thinking, I already am customer centric. Maybe so. And if you are, awesome. Hopefully some of these points will help you get even better at it. But I want to share with you the fact that most companies may think they're customer centric, but actually are operating under a different model. So let me tell you what those other models are, and then we'll talk a little bit about customer centricity. The first model is known as product centric. And you know these companies because their philosophy is, if we build it, they will come. The whole idea here is that they're led by innovation, and they're even making things and investing in new products before the demand exists. They are about being first to market. And you know companies like this. For example, you may remember Apple's Newton, if anybody in the room remembers Apple's Newton, and it was in a category called the personal digital assistant. That category doesn't exist any longer. That has been replaced by the smartphone. But Apple started making that product in 1987, and they didn't ship the first product until 1993. As everybody here knows, today there are no Newtons. That happens in product-centric companies. And you can see how much they're investing because their R&D line is a very large number. What often happens in product-centric companies is that they're very early to market, and it doesn't get enough traction in the adoption curve. So you learn a lot, right? Apple learned a lot, and they applied all those learnings to things that have been successful, like the iPhone and the iPad. These companies that are product-centric, they make big bets to thrive. And a good example is like Toyota's Prius. It worked, but others falter. Like, for example, you might remember MySpace, a social network, which again doesn't exist today. So think about whether or not you're that kind of company. If we build it, they will come. A second very common model is sales-centric. And you know these companies because the salespeople are pretty much running the show. And it's all about getting the deal. The salespeople feel comfortable making discounts. They might even offer products and services that don't yet exist, or suggest the deliveries that are almost impossible for the organization to make. So everybody with that sales-centric, it's all about making the number. So if you're in an organization that's about making the number, and sales is driving everything, risk is increasing. Oftentimes you find that they're over promising, they're having a selling off strategy, and it's very short-term thinking. Market-centric is the third kind that is very common. And they're kissing cousins to product-centric companies, the difference being that they're all about drafting a wave. So these are companies that are like product-centric, thinking about the future and what the trends are. And they have people doing many of the same things that product-centric companies are, with one exception. They are not going to strike until the iron is out. So they're watching categories, which we mentioned earlier, evolve. And so like networking, cloud, cybersecurity, and in the world we're in right now, artificial intelligence. They're waiting for those next big markets that they can then participate in. So they want to draft the wave. That's a market-centric company. And they're not real necessarily interested in being first. So think about Tesla, which came out long after Prius, which was launched in like 1997. And look at what's going on with Tesla today. Or how about Zoom, right? Which came out long after Citrix in 1989 brought out, web conferencing. So for these companies, timing is everything. And that leads us to my favorite operating model, and the one we're going to talk about today, customer centricity. Because in this model, it's all about creating value for your customers. The idea being that we exist as a business to create a customer, and our job is to find, keep, and grow the value of those customers. So decisions in these companies are all anchored in creating customer value, with the idea that that will create business value. Now, you're probably thinking, does it really matter? And I want to tell you, it really matters, especially in those B2B companies where the customer is in control. So I'm just going to share some quick little pieces of data. All this data is available publicly. It's all Gartner and Forrester data, but here's some things to know. I'm just going to give you 5 things to know. 91% of your prospective customers have at least one supplier in mind before they ever begin to a formal evaluation. 91% of them have one supplier already in mind. 89% of your target customers are using generative AI in at least one part of their purchasing process. So if you are not discoverable from an AI perspective, you're missing the boat. 82% of your prospective customers expect some kind of personalization across all your marketing and sales interactions. 80% of your customers are engaging in what's called self-directed buying. They're not even talking to anybody in the company. And that's up from 57% just in 2015. So 10 years ago, we've gone from 57% to 80% of self-directed buying. And last point, 73% of your prospective customers will actively avoid suppliers who send irrelevant outreach. So if you just bombard them with information, then they're probably going to, they'll just opt out. So that's something to keep in mind. So the customer-centric operating model means you place your customers at the center of every business decision. You keep in mind that your purpose is to create a customer, that customer value drives business value, not the other way around, and that you focus on creating loyalty, referrals, so that you can have faster new customer acquisition and close them faster, and resilience in uncertain times. So what do we need to do in order to be more customer-centric? That's our second thing. We have, all of us who run companies, we make decisions every day. The average executive spends 40% of their time making decisions, and we make about 3,500 decisions in a day. And we use our experience and our intuition often to make those decisions, but the thing that we need to make more confident decisions faster is data. Now, data is everywhere today. Data is like coming at us from a fire hose, and it can be very, very overwhelming. So the real challenge isn't getting data, but really getting actionable insights out of that data. So we call the second game changer data-derived customer insights. And what I'm going to use is a little story that will help you think about how you get the right data and the right insights. My grandfather had 5 grandchildren, and he liked to do 2 things. He loved to play cards and go fishing. And if you spent the weekend at Papa's house in the summer, odds are you were going to go fishing. So imagine you're dropped off on Saturday and everyone's going to gather on Sunday for dinner. And you know you're going to go fishing for dinner on Sunday. And imagine what grandfather's first question is going to be. You're 4 years old. So if you think you know what the question is, put it in the chat. But I'm going to tell you, I thought I was pretty smart by the time I was 4 years old. And when Papa would ask me, what kind of fish are we going fishing for? I always had an answer. And my answer was blue ones. All right. First question, what kind of fish are we fishing for? And he would say, go tell grandma that we are going fishing for bluegill in the Forest Park Lake tomorrow. So he could outmaneuver me. All right. And off we would go. And so then the next morning we would go to the lake. We unpack all of our gear and Papa would ask the second most important question. So the first most important question was, what kind of fish are we fishing for? Because that is the answer of who is our ideal customer. And his second question would be looking around at the competition and knowing something about the fish. Do they like it in the sun or the shade? Do they like to be out in the water or near the shore? Do they like it clear or do they like it reedy? Right? Where's our competition? Because the question is, where are we going to put our pole? So you have to know who your customers are, why they buy, where they buy, how they buy, when they buy. If you can just answer these two questions, you will be able to make much better decisions in order to be more customer centric. If you don't have the answer to these questions, then everything you do in marketing and sales becomes a random act. So know your customer data, know your market data, and know your competition data, because that's going to help you decide where to put your pole. You've already decided who you're going after. You've already decided your bait because you got that in the car. Now you need to know where you're going to put your pole. All right. That takes us to number 3, right, of the game changers. And that is growth strategy. And I'm going to recommend a book. If you haven't read Dr. Henry Cloud's book, Necessary Endings, I encourage you to do it, because strategy in itself is a huge conversation that we do not have time for today. But I'm going to give you and use the metaphor in this book to help you think about strategy, because strategy is about choices, right? What you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And the data that you collect, Game Changer 2, that's going to inform your strategy. So in Dr. Henry Cloud's book, Necessary Endings, he uses the idea of a rose bush. So I don't know, is anybody in here a gardener? If you're a gardener, put yes in the chat. I love to garden. So imagine that you are having a garden and you have a place in the garden for a very special plant. And you've decided that you're going to put a rose bush there. And anyone who's grown roses knows that that is a big undertaking. All right, so you decide you're going to put this rose bush in, and you go to the store and you to the nursery and you get a tiny little rose bush, and you can see in your mind's eye after you plant that rose bush that it is going to be glorious, and you are going to have, one of the most prestigious gardens in the neighborhood, right? You're going to be helping the entire neighborhood be better with this one single rose bush. So you are nurturing this rose bush every day. You're making sure you put the right fertilizer and it gets, all the things taken care of to make sure it's going to grow. It gets watered properly, all the things you need to do with this rose bush. And as the rose bush grows, you have to make choices. Things that are not healthy, you have to prune them. Things that might be healthy but are not in line with the vision of how the rose bush is going to look, you have to prune them. Things that are beautiful but maybe taking energy away from other blooms so that they can be fuller and better, you have to prune them. It's about choices in order for that rose bush to become what you envision. So here's my advice to you. If what you are doing in your company is not creating customer value, prune it. Right now, when you go back to the office, identify what's not creating customer value and prune it. If it is creating some value, but draining resources from things that might create greater value, prune it. And if it's of value, but it's not going to enable your organization to thrive and achieve its mission to evolve into that magnificent, glorious rose bush, prune it. Okay? Leaving number 3 for just a moment, I want to leave you with this thought. PR, social media, email, these are all important tactics, but they are tactics, not strategy. Strategies are things like adjacent market, tipping point, king point pins, expand and retain. If you don't understand what strategy is, let's have a conversation so we can make sure that you have the right strategies and then your tactics are supporting those strategies so that you can create that glorious rose bush. Okay, that takes us to our last game changer, which is operational excellence, which includes 3 things: planning, processes, and performance. Plans, that's what translates that strategy into action. It's what makes sure all those activities of whatever they might be doing are aligned to customer-centric goals. And it's what ensures that you eliminate random acts so that you have a deliberate roadmap. Processes, those are things that help you run your company. Processes, you have to map all your customer-facing processes. If you haven't done that, that should be your first step. And lastly, be sure that you have measures around performance that are tied to customers, like customer effort, like customer acquisition, like customer retention, like customer lifetime value, customer referral rates. These are really invaluable measures. So I'm going to leave you with those measures, and that is now to wrap it up.